Question is, shall the bill pass? The chair recognizes Senator Ray Miller from the 15th District.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. As Senator from Gallia County mentioned, amended House Bill 393 designates September the 22nd of each year as Emancipation Day in Ohio. Question I really have is so what? And I'm sure that many people would say, so what? So we're going to have yet one more day in the code that people won't adhere to. So why is this bill necessary, and what will it do in fact? Passage of this bill is meaningful only if we recommit ourselves to the hopes and dreams of the emancipated slaves. It's important to look at why the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in the first place. President Lincoln did not issue the Emancipation Proclamation for freedom and justice. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued to recruit 200,000 African Americans to win the war. President Lincoln said repeatedly, over and over again, that if he could unify the nation without freeing one slave, that he would do so. President Lincoln made it crystal clear repeatedly and consistently that he did not believe that African Americans were equal to whites. So Lincoln did not put forth the 13th Amendment to the Constitution for freedom and justice. He did it very reluctantly. There were members of Congress, Sumner, Stevens, abolitionists like Stanton, Frederick Douglass, who urged him repeatedly to issue the Emancipation Proclamation and then later the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which was ratified in 1865. And as we know, that measure, that constitutional amendment, once ratified by the states, did in fact free the slaves. So for 244 years, people of African descent were held in bondage, treated as chattel, property, treated no better than animals. They did not receive the liberty and justice for all that was promised in our Pledge of Allegiance. Neither did they share in the platitudes expressed by Thomas Jefferson that all men are created equal. Imagine with me, if you can, there are 4 million people who were denied the most fundamental and basic rights of humankind, and then after 244 years, the message is received, you're free, after 244 years. Our museum shop, I love to browse in our museum shop here and pick up the books, read them. Benjamin Arnett, who served in right around 1887, talks in one of the publications about the black codes in the state of Ohio. Benjamin Arnett was an African-American elected from Xenia, was an administrator at Wilberforce University, talked about the euphoria out in the streets when all of the African Americans at the time were anticipating the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, how the hundreds and thousands of people gathered in anticipation. And then when President Lincoln actually did sign the Emancipation Proclamation, there was great celebration in the streets, he writes. I certainly would encourage you to look at those accounts of the Emancipation Proclamation. So here we are 143 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and we still have substantial discrimination being directed towards African Americans in the areas of employment. I read the reports from the Civil Rights Commission oftentimes, and still thousands of cases of employment discrimination today, 143 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Discrimination in housing and health care and mortgage lending, just to mention a few. So I would encourage all members to reflect on this bill and act to bring about real change and not just talk about it. We have legislation pending in the Senate today that would bring about the real teaching of African American history within our schools. We've done quite a bit of talking this year in the Senate about African American history. So our children really need to know this history. It's critically important for all children in the state of Ohio to know the contributions and the history of African Americans in the United States. We have legislation pending, Senate Bill 160, that I've introduced that deals with cultural competence training for physicians, where we have documented discrimination that still exists directed towards African Americans in the field of health care. Documented discrimination still existing, where treatment is being withheld and drugs are being withheld. Documented in our state. I've introduced Senate Joint Resolution 8 that addresses structural and institutional discrimination, some that I've referred to already. So we need to truly advance the hopes and dreams of the former slaves and make the Emancipation Proclamation a living document, and do all that we can to carry out the initial intent and spirit of the proclamation signed by President Lincoln in January of 1863. Urge adoption.
The question is, shall the bill pass? The chair recognizes Senator Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I am loath to debate history, especially history involving slavery and its aftermath and discrimination, with my colleague and friend from Franklin County, but I do have to take issue with the statements he made about Abraham Lincoln. And I do know the issue that he refers to, but more fully what Lincoln said in his response, I believe the response was to I could be mixed up, but I think it was the response to the New York newspaperman, and the name escapes me, though I'll remember it. He ran for president 1872. Anyway, the response went something like this. He was responding to the question from those who were more abolitionist-oriented that he should free the slaves immediately, and he was dragging his heels. And he was responding to the criticisms of those who were trying to undermine the Civil War support in the North by saying this was not a war for Union, it was a war just for freeing the slaves. And in the early days of the war, there was not the unanimity or level of support historians feel, and at the time people felt, for freeing the slaves that there was later in the war. And what he said more fully was, if I could win, the reason I am in this to win the war, and I'm paraphrasing, if the only way to win the war was to free all the slaves, I would free all the slaves. If the only way to win the war is to free none of the slaves, I would free none of the slaves. If the only way to win the war was to free some of the slaves and not others, that's what I would do. And he made that clear, I believe, in 1862, early 1862. And if you had asked me this about 2 months ago when I was reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's new book on A Team of Rivals, I could tell you the exact name of the letter, and I'll probably remember the name of the person in a little bit. But he later on changed his mind before the Emancipation Proclamation, and I take issue with the gentleman on one point. The purpose of the Emancipation Proclamation was not to recruit soldiers. Absolutely not. That came about later. If it had been to recruit soldiers, it would not have been acceptable as it was to the vast majority of Northerners at the time it was issued. The reason it was done is because he came to believe that the only way to win the war was to extinguish slavery in the South. And as long as it was allowed to exist in the South, as long as the South had the hope that they continue, in his mind, that they could continue to have slavery, they would fight the war, and only by extinguishing that hope could he hope to bring the war, he believed, to a successful conclusion. Only later did the issue of recruiting former slaves as soldiers get raised with any credibility. And I think it is fair to say that Abraham Lincoln on his own came to the conclusion about the Emancipation Proclamation, and he did so at a time and place where he was even ahead of his more abolitionist-oriented colleague in his cabinet, Salmon Chase from Ohio. He deserves the credit. He deserves the credit for evolution in his thinking, and it is evolution that we all need to be mindful of as we take a look at our history and at where we need to go in the future. And for that reason, I too support the bill. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Chair recognizes Senator Ray Miller from the 15th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. And